point, working for the Department of Defense on a military base, writing speeches and stuff for the base commander when they would send off troops to Iraq, that sort of thing, fun stuff. And moved back, ended up in DC, and then met my future wife, and that she was from Southern California, so I ended up out here eventually. And then I would say my first real gig in quote unquote show business was I got a staff writing job at National Lampoon, and their last incarnation, which was mostly online, about 5-6 years back. And so I was like writing articles for them. I wrote for their radio show, and then I would say about 3 years ago, 3-4 years in that time frame, they actually hired me and a couple other writers to write a pilot for Netflix. The other writers, Kit Lively from Mad Magazine, and Paul Lander from he's one of the writers on Bill Maher's show, or used to be, and on HBO. And so we wrote a failed pilot, which it's always fun to have a failed pilot in your resume. It was actually pretty fun. It was actually a really fun experience, and the entire concept of the series was like an animated little comedy series, like workplace, but kind of like with the like sort of the World News Daily or whatever that magazine was, that had Bat Boy and always like Hillary Clinton is dating the Eye of Moloch and things like that. But like, so it's like based in those offices, but all the creatures actually lived in the offices next to the human workers who were actually putting out the magazine. So that was fun. It ended up in development hell, and where most things go. And after that, just I've kind of just been a fixture on the film critic circuit online, I think, just like Craig too. So I mean, I run a fairly popular blog, if I brag a little bit about it, Bonkers Ass Cinema, which is just mainly dealing with horror and exploitation film, but also the last year had been working for Rebeller and Fangoria before Cinestate imploded a few weeks ago. So it's actually, I'm living the dream all the way up to this point of getting paid for writing about film, which is something a lot of people don't get to do. But then I would say 2 years ago, I ran into who would be my future production partner, Brian White. He's the producer and editor on Creep Cop, and he was in film school at the time at the University of California, and he needed a project for his class, and and up to that point, he just knew me as the guy at the bar, drunk, railing about Cannibal Holocaust. And he's like, hey, like, I need a director. I need someone who can write something. And so we, eventually ended up being Creep Cop, and it was fun with him because we got to steal all of our equipment for that from the University of California to actually film it. And Creep Cop is what Creep Cop is. It's a Troma film. I mean, I would say it's a step up above amateur, but we did our best. We filmed in February last year, and on the day, you got to understand, like, it hadn't rained in Southern California in about 2 years. And if you remember, I don't know if you watched the news in February from last year, there was that big storm that came through Southern California. I don't know, you saw like the cars, like with the asphalt breaking apart on the roadways and cars being stranded on little islands of asphalt. Well, that was the day we filmed, was the day that storm came through, and our permits, when our insurance were only good for that day. So we just had to do it that night. It destroyed all our sound and everything. And so I'm proud of it as a first film. I think it's decent. I made an exploitation film, which is what I wanted to do. And It got it's I think now has gotten 13 official selections on the festival circuit. It was up until the COVID touring Australia as part of Fangoria's Monster Fest, which was pretty cool. And yeah, then eventually got picked up by Troma. I mean, I've known those guys and Lloyd for years, and I met up with them when it played at Tampa Bay Screams last year, and got that deal off the ground. So it is Troma, so hopefully I get paid for it someday, but we'll find out. But and then after that, I mean, Brian and I had we partnered with a couple local musicians, and so we just did that music video for Thea the Band and Eyes Go Dark, which is up. I don't even know what award it's up for, but a LA Music Award, which is pretty cool. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. But yeah, that's where I am now. I had my second. I was getting ready to begin fundraising for the second short film right when COVID hit, so everything's just on pause right now. So, and that brings me to now, I guess.
Okay. Questions for Matt?
So Troma picked it up. That wasn't what your goal was, or was it your goal is to get picked up by a production
Honestly,
company
yeah,
like that?
in terms of distribution, I had no goals whatsoever. So, I mean, because you make a short film, you don't expect to make money on it at all. I mean, like basically you hope to get in the festival circuit and people look at it and take notice. And then you go to the festivals and you network and you meet some producers and other filmmakers. That's usually the goal. Getting like distribution and getting paid for it. It's always a long shot, but I mean, I'm thrilled that it picked it up. I wasn't expecting that. So.
I had one other the Netflix show you were writing.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2017-ish.
Oh, so it's just a couple of years. Because I didn't know if it was like before its time. Because I know they came out with a few sort of adult cartoons after the fact.
Yeah, I would say it was right around like when all those cartoons. I mean, what's that Nick Kroll one? I always forget. But
What's
Big Mouth.
Yeah,
Big Mouth, right? Big Mouth.
Big Mouth. Yeah, so it was right around when that was coming out too.
Yeah, with the horn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my son's in here too. He wanted.
Yeah, no, it's also possible too that it just wasn't very good.
Well, isn't that what every artist thinks? They always think it's worse, and the other people.
Yeah, well, it's either that or you say what you were saying before. You just gotta like convince yourself it's ahead of its time, and no one appreciates it right now.
Well, maybe that.
It was a fun experience. I'll say that, but I definitely saw the inner workings, and I'm just amazed anything ever gets done. So.
Craig, why don't you talk a little bit about your journey to being in the film business for over a decade?
Absolutely. Went to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, got the BA in cinema and photography, and then with the meager savings I had, thought Los Angeles and California were not, Los Angeles and New York, excuse me, were not good options. So I went to Wilmington, North Carolina, which was in the 80s a heyday time for Dino De Laurentiis's studio here. Unfortunately, by the late 80s, he had made a habit of spending $15 and $16 million on movies that then made $1 and $2 million at the box office. So he went bankrupt and sold the studio. It got sold to Carol Co., which was the company behind Rambo, and they had it into the early 90s. I got here in 92, and thankfully things had just started to pick up. TV movies were shooting here, and the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, the television show based on Raiders of the Lost Ark, was shooting the old man segments. If you ever saw that show, there was old Indy in the beginning and end, remembering his days as a youth. They shot all of those bits here, and then the kids were running all over the world. They were shooting that everywhere but here. So I was putting resumes in on every show that was in town, and nothing was happening because that's not how you get jobs in the film industry. I was also going in a shirt and tie, which was pretty silly, apparently. So it was getting down to the wire. I was running out of money, and I stopped by to see this guy who had a sound studio here, and he shot local TV commercials, and we would just stop in and see him sometimes to say, you know, is there anything going on? And he would point us towards things. And this one day I stopped in and he said, hey, would you want to do extra work, like be a background extra in a movie? And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So he said, well, this movie called Amos and Andrew is gearing up, and my friend Pam is doing the extras casting. She's out at the studio right now. Go tell her that I sent you. So drove right to the studio, got in, and said, hey, Chuck sent me. And Pam was like, oh, cool, and signed me right up. So we were doing all night shoots on this movie. I had no idea what Amos and Andrew was, and it turned out not to be the old show redone, but instead was a race comedy with Samuel L. Jackson before anybody really knew who he was, and the bigger star of the two at the time, Nicolas Cage, were the two stars of that movie. And we shot all nights because the whole thing takes place across one afternoon and night into the dawn. And so we shot all nights for several months. And I was a TV reporter extra. You can literally spot me in one like 5-second shot in the movie. I thought it was going to be Samuel L. Jackson, Nicolas Cage, and me. I thought that was kind of how that was going to go. Was not the case. From there, though, I was very helpful to one of the assistant directors. And I do want to say, too, that assistant directors are not the same thing as director's assistants. Director's assistants get the director a cup of coffee. Assistant directors run the set for the director. The first assistant director actually is on set running the set for him. And then the second assistant director is handling the scheduling and putting out the schedules for the future days. And then if you have another assistant director, they are called a second, not a third, not in America. And the second handles usually the background extras and the stand-ins. So I was working with the second AD, helping out, just like helping here and there. And eventually she introduced me to her boyfriend, who was our caterer. And she said, hey, this is Craig, and he's been so helpful to me, I'm going to hire him on my next show. And there you go. That's really how you get a job in the film industry. So sure enough, Super Mario Brothers came to town, and she got a job on it. And it took a little bit of time because there were a lot of people whose last names matched bigger names on the call sheet. So there were a lot of production assistants on that film. But eventually something opened up, and Cindy did hire me. And so I got to move. I did extra work on Super Mario Brothers, and then got to move over and become production assistant there. And from once I'd worked on Super Mario Brothers, that was pretty much it. Worked on TV commercials, television movies. Got the series American Gothic on CBS in 1995. Did that whole one-season run. And then in 1997, had a particularly good year working on a science fiction movie called Virus, and then going right from that to Dawson's Creek. And I did 4 seasons of Dawson's Creek as a production assistant. At the same time, I also managed to get in a few assistant director jobs, which is a little bit up the ladder, and was the second assistant director on Stephen King's The Night Flyer, and a movie called Shadrach. Yeah, that was my other big credit for that. And that was, the basics of that. I made a independent movie that I wanted Cinema Home Video to pick up, which is David Dakota's company out in Los Angeles. He was the guy behind some of the Full Moon Puppet Master movies and things, and he had his own home video company. And they called them sell-through, and they sold movies when movies were generally $39 or $49.99 retail. He sold them for $9.99 or $14.99. And they were shot on video. So I called him up and said, I want to make a movie and have you look at it. And he said, I'll look at anything you send me. And I said, what are you seeing too much of? And he said, stuff set in one set where they rent a house and they just shoot the entire film in one setting. I'd rather see some exteriors. So I shot a movie that was 90% exteriors called Island of the She-Devils, and finished it going into much credit card debt, and called him up at the end, called up Cinema Home Video, and he didn't answer the phone. And somebody else had. And I said, well, can I speak to David? And they said, oh, David doesn't own the company anymore. He sold it. And I said, well, I have a film that he was going to look at. And they said, yeah, we're not going to be looking at anything new for a while. We're going to refigure how we do business. And Cinema Home Video, I think, went out of business shortly after that. I don't think it was in these other hands very long. But I had a post-production work that was going to cost roughly the same amount that production cost. And I couldn't do it with nobody interested in looking at it. So I shelved it at that point, and that movie has never seen the light of day except in a rough VHS cut that I bring out and show people, and they throw tomatoes at me, and I go home. But the bigger films, you know, that was production assistants do whatever needs to be done. I ran hither and yon. I brought batteries to people for their walkie-talkies. I got actors breakfast and drinks and things like that. I mainly fell into coordinating the makeup, hair, and wardrobe. So actor would show up in the morning, and I would tell them if you'd go get dressed, and then the next person would show up, and I'd go, you go to the hair chair, and the next person would show up, they go to makeup, and kind of orchestrate that so that no chair is sitting empty and people are getting the stuff done, so I could send them to set. And I did that on several shows, and had memorable run-ins with people like Shannon Doherty and Kate Jackson, who was not very pleasant, and then very, very pleasant interactions with people like Roma Downey and Gary Cole. Never really did anything, you know, people tend to think when you say you work in the industry, they tend to think you work on Mission Impossible movies and big, giant feature films. And they're not, those don't always come to where you are. Wilmington didn't get that many, especially back in the 90s. So I worked, you know, TV movies with the lady who played the neighbor on The Jeffersons, you know, which she was a great lady. But, you know, if I say Janae Dubois, nobody necessarily knows who she is. But you certainly know the face because you probably grew up watching The Jeffersons. So, but that was great living. What's that?
Can I interrupt for a second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Hey, I think The Night Flyer is one of the biggest films of all time.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. I was just talking with the director online today about that. Yeah, he was a great guy. That was a lot of fun. I carried the stand around the hardback the entire run, waiting for Stephen King to show up. They even had a part stand by for him, and we lucked out and were shooting during the Green Mile book tour, and he could not make it to Wilmington. And so I've worked on the only Stephen King movie, just about, that he does not make a cameo in and never even showed up on the set of. So I've still never met the man.
Did he write the script for that?
He didn't. Mark Pavia, who wrote and directed it, wrote the script based on his story, The Night Flyer.
How much did you? Sorry, hey, now I'm just interrupting because I love that. I love that. I'm geeking out because I love that movie. Like the end of it when it goes to black and white, I think is like one of the creepiest, like scariest scenes of all time. How involved were you with that? Like, did you shoot that at all, or?
Yeah. They had parts of that are the actual airport, but most of that is a set. They built what's called the Timmy Building, which was a little side studio, really just an old warehouse. But they built the set there, and they were clever because they built it with thick wood at the bottom, and so that fog, you remember the fog that's all over the ground? They lay that in, and it runs, but it'll just run right on out the doors if you don't put like a little aquarium, so to speak. And so you had to be real careful running around that set because you had to step over this, you know, like 6-inch thing all the time. And, you know, heaven help you if you forget and you're like, you know, I'll get it. And you take off running, hit that and go down. But yeah, we shot that. And I'm very delighted to tell you, Matt, that I shot some of the webbing because you remember it gets real cobwebby and creepy looking in the black and white.
Yeah.
And there were cobwebs everywhere, and that was done with hot glue guns, throwing it up, and it looks like webs. It's even better than Halloween stuff. And the special effects guy was doing it one day, and I walked by, and I didn't have anything I had to do right that second, and I said, "Could I do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, what the hell?" And he gave it to me. So I got to shoot some of the webs up onto the set. So I'm delighted that, you know, I had a little piece of special effects history there.
No, awesome. Hey, I'll let you finish, but I that's just one of my favorite movies. So.
Well, it was a blast to work on, and it actually I had a drought coming off of American Gothic, which shot from the summer to February '95 into early '96, and I just had for whatever reason, everybody else had been working on the shorter TV movies and things, and consequently I couldn't get a job because everybody just kept moving. As the assistant directors would, you know, get the next job, they would just take the PAs, the production assistants, with them. And so I had this drought from February until July. Yeah, it was July. And thank God, what had ended up happening on Night Flyer was the first assistant director, they fell behind schedule. By day 3, they were 2 days behind schedule. Do that math. And so at the end of the first week, he was fired. and the second moved up to first, second moved up to second, and I got brought on as the new second. And it was a non-union, which is how I was able to do it, and be the second. But yeah, that was an extraordinarily great opportunity, and that got me a signature on my Porky's Revenge poster that I have by the young man who played Pee-wee in Porky's, whose name is escaping me right now. But and then Miguel Ferrer was extraordinary to work
I
with.
was going to ask about that. I
Oh,
assume
yeah.
you met him.
He was wonderful. My mom actually had a big surgery during that back in McLeansboro, and he called her after, because she had watched him on oh God, I forget what show he'd been on. He was a recurring character on a series, maybe Midnight Caller with Gary Cole, and he'd been on there a few times or something. But she knew who he was, and he called her in the hospital and pepped her up. So yeah, he was.
It wasn't like, wow, you're the shithead in every movie I watch.
You know what I found over the time was the guys that play the best shitheads on camera are usually the nicest people off. And sometimes it's just the reverse too. The people who are the nicest people are actually kind of jerks in real life. But I was actually about all caught up. So Canada took everything away in the early 2000s. There were 17 productions in Vancouver in November 2001 or 2000, I think. And so by 2001, there was almost nothing happening here in Wilmington except little independent films that did not pay you very much. They were paying $50 a day or something, and you would shoot for like 10 days, and that's not enough to live on. And so I stepped away and got some other, regular employment. And I've kept a toe in. I've had scripts out being looked at, and I'm working on a horror short as an assistant director right now. We're on hold due to the pandemic, but we were supposed to shoot in March, and now it's September. But it's a little demon possession on an island thing. Going to run about a half hour. Looks like it's going to be pretty good. So,
Other questions for Craig?
I don't know if Christian has any questions. I feel like I'm monopolizing it.
That's all right.
Oh,
There's
it's
only 3 of
okay.
us.
I don't have any questions. I'm just listening, and I think it's always. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I just think it's interesting to hear other people's stories, and I think, especially as I've gotten older, I think it's good to make these connections, and I think it's good that Renleg is offering these things, because as I've been through different stages in my career, I think that going to these things and just meeting these people is truly worth it in the long run. So I just thank you for that. So, and I'll let you know, I'll chime in if I have any questions for sure.
Hey, Christian, are you a filmmaker, or you want to be a filmmaker, or what?
No, I'm a photographer, so I'm kind of like geeky when it comes to like cameras and stuff. And that is one question I was gonna ask about. I know that some people, like, I can't remember what it was, but there has been like people that have filmed like full on movies on iPhones, and I wanted to hear like your take on that. I mean, you guys probably are not in the camera department, but I just didn't know if you had anything to say along those lines, because
like Steven Soderbergh and Tangerine and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one I'm familiar with. Get the image onto some kind of medium. That's what does it matter if you're using a Quaker Oats pinhole camera, an iPhone, or a Red, or a 35 or 70 millimeter film? Just get the images. Make something and get it on, in focus and onto a medium that people can watch. That's my opinion on that.
Okay. Oh, that sounds good. I mean, that answers everything. So.
Yeah, well, I just think what I like about that stuff, I mean, I would prefer everything be on film, but like that's just never going to happen anymore. But I do like how the iPhone just, it's democratized everything. So like any young aspiring filmmaker can actually go out and they don't have to rent equipment or buy equipment. They can just make their movie. And a lot of the stuff not that bad, like just the quality. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the iPhone there is some pros and cons though to that too. Like, I mean, you are going to get grain more in darker lighting instances for sure, other than like a Red for sure.
Yeah.
What was the movie that they used the Fisher Price camera? Was that Nadia? Where they used an actual toy camera for that?
That's right. Yeah, they sure did. It was a kid's home video toy. That's exactly what it was.
Siskel and Ebert rated it as an amazing device to use to make a movie, and it was a. Have you seen Nadia, Matt?
I have not. No.
It's a
I have not.
big production,
From
and I can't
84?
remember the name of the Fisher Price camera. Did you say you'd seen it?
No, is that from 1984? You're going way back.
You're looking at the Well, I'm old, okay.
IMDb. I'm checking things.
Yeah, that's from '84. That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a $50 or somewhat child's toy that became a hot property in Hollywood because a lot of cinematographers love the grainy look, and Nadia is using that totally through, I think, the whole film or most of it.
When we
What
did,
is that called?
oh, what's
The
that?
film is Nadia, but I can't recall
What
the name of the Fisher Price camera.
Okay, like what? How do you spell that?
Nadia. Nadia. It's about
Okay,
gymnasts.
got it.
Woman's
I'll have
name.
to look into that. 'Cause
When we were
I'm quite
shooting,
a nerd.
Our class films in the 80s at SIU, we were using wind-up 16 millimeter cameras. They were Bell and Howell, but they ran off of a wind-up motor, which was, not great because your speed changed. The more you wound it up, the faster the film would run through the camera. Therefore, when you projected it, the slower people would move. So you had to be careful to not do a full take that ran the length of it because at some point the speed of it was going to change. I was watching Night of the Living Dead, the movie made in 1968, and they sent out a news crew, and the news crew is actually using that same wind-up 16 millimeter Bell and Howell that I was using in the 80s. They were using in 1968 as a news camera back then. So
I was trying to look it up real fast, but maybe I'll post that later.
Hey, Craig, is the movie you directed, is that available digitally at all?
it is not at this time. I actually have, it was shot on 3/4 inch video, and I have the tapes. It needs a fine edit. The only edit that I was ever able to do was with 2 VCRs on a VHS dub, and very rough. I mean, to the point where you can hear me saying action and cut at times. That's how rough it was. But it involves bikini-clad women who live on an island, and these scientists who come to stop the end of the world because it just so happens that the end of the world is happening on this island that these warrior women live on. So everybody wants to see it, and I would love to show it to everybody, but unless it was a little better edited, I don't know if I'd ever let that VHS rough cut out.
Okay. Another question I was gonna have, and I recently read an article about this, so I wanted to hear your guys' perspective on the new streaming platforms that coming through. So what is your guys' viewpoint on that? So I read an article recently, and it talked about, I don't know if you guys are familiar, when Netflix first started out, and it talked about how you would get those little discs in the mail. Are you familiar with what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So I have
DVDs?
read articles DVDs. I was looking for that. I read this article, and some reporter actually has quit doing the streaming platform because he says that it's overwhelming, and there's just so much content, therefore that he's just decided to do the DVD format instead of having all that content so that he can just focus on that. So I think from you guys, being in the film industry, I think I would like to hear your guys' viewpoint on the streaming services, and how there is so much content at our fingertips, literally, on our devices. I would like to hear you guys out on that.
Matt, you want to go
Craig,
first?
do you want to go first? Because
Does that make sense? Does
I'll
that make
talk
sense?
for 45 minutes on this.
Well, I will tell you that, it's, you're right. There is a lot of content. And what I've discovered, and I've seen other people talking about this on social media, is that every once in a while I'll put a disc in, because I have a huge to-watch pile, and I'll put a disc in and it won't work. For whatever reason, it just doesn't work. So I'll go, well, I'm going to stream something. I'll just stream a movie. And it takes me longer than the length of a movie to find a streaming movie that I will settle on to watch between Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Shudder
Apple
and
TV
all of the other things I have. So there is the content level is so high that it's hard, and I don't want to waste my time. It's even worse than in the old video store days when you would take a tape home to watch. You were kind of stuck then. You kind of watched it no matter what. But now you click a button and the movie, oh, I'm not liking this 10 minutes in, and you turn that one off and you turn another one on. And you go, well, this one's not catching me either. So that gets old. And I will tell you the other thing, my other big disturbing thing that's been happening of late is when the streaming services will alter the films because of current concerns and not even say anything to anybody until they get caught at it, which is, for example, Splash. There's a shot where Daryl Hannah climbs out of the river or the ocean or something and walks with her bare bottom across a street. And they've digitally added hair down over her bare bottom because that's on Disney Plus. So it bothers me that the streaming services will alter the films and edit them. And there's been at least one other example of that where a film was altered for its airing. And of course,
also too, did you see Joe Bob talking about the censorship of film due to streaming? Because corporate America owns all. If everything goes to streaming and everything goes away from physical media,
right.
Corporate America, especially the Disneys and all that, they own all of the content. And so now, I mean, we could get into the nitty gritty, but when you just saw NBC Universal taking down the 30 Rock blackface episodes earlier this week, we can debate that all you want, but the idea is if you don't own those actual physical copies, the DVDs or the Blu-rays of 30 Rock, those episodes may be gone forever just because some corporation just deemed it so based on current trends.
I've even heard that people have bought things through iTunes, which I don't use, and iTunes loses a license. And so even though you bought it for the purchase price, it's not in your library anymore because iTunes doesn't have a license for it anymore. I don't know how that seems like a class action lawsuit waiting to happen.
Bruce Willis made a big deal out of that with iTunes and music, saying that he had such a huge catalog of music. And iTunes came back and said they reserve the right to remove anything that they want to at any time. And I think he threatened to sue, and then reading the terms of service, realized that you have no rights. Once they're there, you have nothing.
Right.
Unless you have a physical disc or, disc, you got nothing.
Was that a laser disc reference?
I think that's a
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, I have my Laserdisc collection for sale, so if anybody wants everything,
do you have those old Criterions?
What's that? Yeah.
You have those old Criterions?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
Do you still have Twice Upon a Time with the uncut?
Oh, that's a tricky one. You can tell you're deep in the nerddom here.
I got the Godfather.
The Twice Upon a Time that is uncensored is amazing, and the one they censored is horrible.
Exactly, and there's another one that's been changed, and if you don't own a physical copy.
So Twice Upon a Time, I at least at one time had the original.
Yeah.
And I had to work hard to get it because it was altered radically to be a kid's movie when it wasn't. But anyway, let's get back on track a little. It looks like we may have our full time. I have seen no message. We might be lucking out, or either that or in 2 minutes this all drops off. But I had a question for Matt in terms of filmmaking on your short film. Since you're new to this, what were the expectations that got met from making that movie day to day, and what were surprises, good and bad, that happened as a filmmaker that you didn't expect?
Well, maybe the biggest surprise was just getting out there the day of shooting and realizing I had no idea what the hell I was doing, which I think happens to a lot of people. Because I never really wanted to be a director. Being involved in film was something I've always wanted to do, but being a director, I don't know, was specifically my goal. But when you work in independent cinema, if you want to get stuff done and get stuff off the ground, you got to take charge and just do it yourself. And so I kind of had to learn the process from scratch because I didn't go to film school, obviously. I'm just a guy who watches a lot of movies. Speaking of physical media, this is my to watch pile right there. And then actually it's kind of funny. the Sufferings of Young Werther copies right next to it, which it's it's ideal because being the life of a cinephile is lonely and desolate. But honestly, just learning what I didn't know before, because I was lucky that I had Brian, who actually went to film school, who could teach me more of the technical aspects, more of like the editing. Like I had no idea what the hell the 180 rule was, or eye line match and things like that. Like just that's stuff you don't think about even as a cinephile. And but honestly too, like it grew to a point that I wasn't ready for. Like when you actually like I just thought like filmmaking, especially on the independent level, was like just hanging out with your friends and doing stuff. And by the way, if you're ever making a film, don't cast your friends as actors. Like just that's the big no-no. Like the friends are there for building the scenery and not chewing it. Let's just say that. But like, and so I thought that's what it would be. But like in terms of, like I'm sitting there casting my movie, and then all of a sudden like I have like this guy who's the biggest asshole, by the way, Doug Leto, who played the creep cop. He was like John Krasinski's like stand-in in that Jack Ryan show, and I'm like, hey, that's cool. And then this other guy that was like in my film, who was like, if you've seen Titanic, when it's about ready to hit the iceberg, like that couple that's out there on the deck and they run away, like that guy was in my film. And so all of a sudden like things are snowballing and I have no idea what I'm doing. And honestly, just going through the process, making my mistakes. Like, honestly, that's why I was like such, like I'm so confident in spending so much money and resources on my next one. Cause I'm 35 years old at this point. Like I'm not young. I can't like make 5, 6, 10 short films and get my career going. Either I get it going or I don't at this point. So like I'm willing, because I've gone through the process now and I've made my mistakes, that I can actually learn enough to actually make like a top tier little horror short, hopefully that goes up to where I want it to and get noticed a little bit. So I don't know if that answers your question at all. It's a little rambling. But
It does.
Can I ask a question real quick,
Sure.
John? Sorry, Rob. I see John on the screen and I just
It's all good.
What is your and this goes out to both Matt and Craig, is what is your favorite movie? Like to just sit back and watch. What do you enjoy? And what version of that movie do you enjoy?
Matt?
Oh, am I going first?
Yep, you got to go the
Mine's
first.
mine's really easy and unpretentious. It's Evil Dead 2.
Nice.
Like it's the movie that got me interested in filmmaking. Like it's
Shot
just like to me,
3
like,
hours from me.
what's that?
Shot just 3 hours from me in Wadesboro, North Carolina,
Ooh, yeah.
1987. I've actually stood, by the way, on a trip to Charlotte. I stopped off and went to the high school where they use the gymnasium for the sets, and it's abandoned, and it's this deep in crap just piled up. It's like a hoarder's house. But and I wouldn't step into it because there's no telling what was in there that you could cut your feet up or whatever. But at least opened the door and got pictures inside the gymnasium where they built that. I'm gonna go with Goldfinger. I'm gonna pick a Bond movie. Yeah, I'm a big Bond fan, so I could watch that movie literally anytime with anyone.
I just recently rewatched every single one in order.
Nice.
And I would actually say that's the best one in terms of like if the aliens came to Earth and I had to show them what a James Bond movie was. That's probably
it's the
one
perfect part of the formula for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And it kind of became, the blueprint for most of the rest of them. And they kept trying to go back to it, but that's a whole other thing. So yeah, so but genre filmmaking is my favorite, Mark. I don't tend to like the big Hollywood green screen stuff as much, although I do enjoy the Marvel movies. But I like weird movies that played in the drive-in in the Southeast in the 70s. I like anything like that. I like anything that Joe Bob Briggs shows because of his commentary on it. That's my bailiwick. The weirder the movie, the more I like it.
So you like Terminator 2 by Bruno Mattei, right?
I haven't seen that one. I did see Rodrigo Obregon from the Andy Sedaris movies plays a Terminator chasing Roger Moore's daughter and Robert Davi or somebody like that. That's the most Terminator rip-off Italian thing I've seen recently.
Hey, don't worry. Hey, Terminator 2 is not a rip-off of Terminator. It's a rip-off of Aliens.
Oh, how beautiful. How
Yes.
beautiful.
It's perfectly Italian.
I'm going to have to seek that one out for sure.
Mark's asked the question. Mark
Severin
asked the question that led to my final thing to talk about, and that was our passions. And definitely you guys are showing those, and I think I share those passions too. So, low budget, I don't know what word would be the right word. Some people call it schlock. Some people I usually call it psychotronic movies. I like that term, but
That's old school.
yeah, well, I've dated myself 3 times. But,
Like the Videodrome, right?
That's
yeah.
right. I used to write for Psychotronic Video Magazine, so
That's
my
Craig
age
has
too.
articles.
Wow.
I was going to tell Matt Craig was nice enough to have Bruce Campbell call me and leave a
Wow.
voicemail on my answering machine when he worked with him on American Gothic.
Man.
Craig's also can be seen in quite a few movies. Empire Records, is that one of your biggest screen
That probably
times,
is
or-
the biggest. That actually, I'm a GIF or GIF or however you say that. They actually took my guy from that movie and made him into a GIF. Although you can't find him very easily, but I saw it. So
I recall you had a speaking part in American Gothic, and
yeah,
you sent
and
me the photo from Mario Brothers in your costume. I don't remember that, but you sent me a photo in costume from Mario.
yeah, they kept featuring all the pretty girls up close to camera, so you can't really see me in the movie. But yeah, I had a heck of an outfit in that movie. I had speaking parts in American Gothic and Dawson's Creek. I'm the school janitor in Dawson's Creek too. That's not speaking, but they just had me dude up as the janitor at least once a season. So every year that they were in high school, if you see a janitor doing anything in the background, it's me. I wanted to say though, Matt, since you like Italian cinema, I do have to let you know that I used to work for Enzo Castellari's daughter, Stefania
What?
Gironi. Yeah, Stefania.
Man. The
I've had
Inglorious
dinner with him.
Bastards director, the original Inglorious Bastards.
Exactly, and I've had dinner with him multiple times at her house here in Wilmington. So, yeah, that was pretty good.
Hey,
For
that's pretty cool.
that's fan.
That's probably the coolest thing you've ever told me.
I was able to visit Wilmington and visit Craig for summer of '94. Once again, old is the theme. And did things. I think Craig, we went to a film with the wife of the guy who made the ear in Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet.
Yeah, that's actually her. That's Enzo Castellari's daughter.
Oh, that was her?
Yeah, she was married at the time to the guy who made the ear in Blue Velvet. That's right.
Okay, there you go, man. I went to see a movie with her.
Such a small world.
But it was very nice to go out there. Craig was nice enough to let me go on one of his sets and meet the actors and production crew one night. And I just kept in Wilmington. It was a small place, so you would run into everybody was an extra and everything. Matlock was filmed there, and they just were desperate for people from out of town to be in the background because everybody in town had been in the background. So it was kind of, I would meet, one actor number 4 at this party, actor number 2 from a Lifetime movie at this party. So it was kind of fun to see how that whole setup was working back then.
Matlock was great for bringing when people would come to town just for that exact reason, because they liked fresh faces, and so you could take anybody on and show them what production looked like easily, and they got to see Andy Griffith usually. And I got to spend just making some money. I did it one day, and we were shooting out at Wrightsville Beach, and I got to spend the day with Jerry Ryan in a bikini. Ooh.
Well, I didn't mean
still not as jealous.
I didn't mean to derail the passions we have for different movies. Do we have some other things we want to talk about there before we have some final questions?
What's the what's the advice for young people like Christian, or like what would you say to somebody saying, I want to go into film? Like,
this would be the intervention that talked them out of it.
And that's actually good advice. And here's the thing: if you're passionate enough about it, you'll take that advice and not listen to it. And that's how you have to be anyway, because there's a lot of discouragement in the business. It's whether it's advertent or inadvertent, it happens. And so that's actually really good, because if you can get past that, then that's the first step to actually doing it. I would tell you one of the biggest things is if you're looking to get into the business, just be prepared to do extra work or be an unpaid intern if a show will hire you for that, or a production assistant. Don't necessarily think you're going to become the director of photography, on day 2 or whatever. You got to work your way up, and you got to be willing to do some kind of crappy jobs to get around people. But
And
you
also
saw,
doing that, you learn everything. When you do that, you learn everything.
And you may even think that, like, Christian right now, if he decided tomorrow to start doing film, he loves camera and he may head towards camera, but he may also get on set and realize that he likes props, or he likes set dressing, or he likes costumes, or anything else, and he can move in a completely different direction. And that's another thing, is keep your options open, because you never know, and be willing to do anything that anybody offers you an opportunity, because the more people you know, the more people are likely to either recommend you to others or hire you themselves. And it really is
Absolutely.
who you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's with almost any industry, though I think in the world, I think so too. And I definitely think especially with this as well too.
Yeah. Well, my advice is to always just go out and make a film. Like, everyone has their excuse. Like, if you want to make a film, you'll make it a film. Like if you're interested in it, you'll do it. Like, you'll grab an iPhone, you'll rent equipment, you'll do it. Everyone always talks about, like, oh, I just have this idea, if only I could do it. And those people will never do it. Like, never, not in a million years. And so, like, you can do anything. Like, go grab an iPhone, rent some equipment, like, do what I do here, and just find some local artists who, want to film a music video or whatever, and just do it for free, offer it up, get that experience. Like, if you're in Southern Illinois, at least 10 people who want to be a white rapper. Like, you can just film their video. Like, just take advantage of the people, get involved in other people's projects. Like, right before COVID hit, I was a local director I'm friends with here. I was played a vampire redneck victim in their movie. Like, just get involved with that. BPAs, just get coffee on local sets. Like Craig said, just observe what's going on, talk to people, stick your nose in there a little bit, and just be annoying a little bit, but also be helpful and be like, I'll do this. I'll do this annoying task no one else wants to do. And so that's just how you get noticed.
To build on what Matt's saying too, yeah, absolutely take a free job or two and get going, but also set a line in the sand and only work for free a certain number of times. Make it a finite number of times, because otherwise people will take advantage of you and you'll be working for free 10 years into the business. So, I'll do 5 things, and on the 6th, I'm going to need to start getting paid. And that may cut you out of working on some things, because people will tell you they can't afford to pay you. But, like I said, otherwise, at some point, you're going to feel like, well, nobody is ever going to pay me because I just keep working for free on everything.
Our third filmmaker that I'd hoped to join us was named Michael Ricci, and he is in Carbondale. He has some open casting calls. He makes zombie films down there. He's an Evil Dead fan. Nice. He came up to the college and showed his films off. He began middle-aged. It was always a dream. He runs Mike's Music down in Carbondale, and just about 9 years, he just decided he had waited too long and just started doing it. So he does a good job of in the same genre in Southern Illinois. If anybody is interested, you look out for his films. He usually has casting calls around Carbondale all the time.
Is that the big genre that all the amateur filmmakers go to? Is that horror? Is that always? It seems like anytime you hear about an amateur filmmaker, it's always a horror movie.
If there were other filmmakers or people who were aspiring to be filmmakers right now, I would on here. My number one rule is don't make a zombie film. I am a judge or one of the reviewers for my buddy Miguel's festival here in Santa Ana, Horrible Imaginings. I don't know, Craig, if you've ever heard of it. It's like it's one of the bigger horror festivals in the United States. And so I had to sit there and like we go through 1,800 short film submissions. And like, so, and just imagine like 60-70% are zombie films. Like, it's just like, you're not going to get noticed that way. Like, it's got to be something really special. Like,
Mark, I will tell you my opinion on that too is the reason they tend towards horror. Usually they like horror, but also there's a belief that horror is easy. And what's funny is I've listened to enough people talk about making horror films to know that, and they're right, that horror film is actually one of the most difficult things to do because it involves every other kind of genre and it's got science fiction elements, it's got comedy elements, it's got drama elements, and the actors all have to perform all of that and be scared. And it's not just throwing buckets of blood at the camera. You know, you've got to have something more on the ball. But that is part of the reason. And there was, for a long time, it was the most surefire genre you could release something in. If you made a horror film and it was, in focus and it ran 70 minutes, somebody would pick it up to release. It may only go to video, but, somebody was going to put it out. But if at the same time, if you made a Western and you had, hobby horses because you couldn't afford, you only had $12 to make your movie, and you don't have any production value in a Western, nobody's probably going to buy that. So nobody would generally, risk their time on that. Science fiction movies are also, until now when you can green screen everything, but back when you would have to build sets, it was hard to make low budget science fiction that looked valid, to film viewer eye. So horror is where people tend to go, and zombies tend to be very, like Matt was saying, they're overdone because they're so easy to do. There are even films, there's a film called The Barn, and it's an older film called The Barn, and it's about kids who car breaks down, they end up in a barn. The barn has radioactive bats in it for some reason, but the bats bite people and they become zombies. And so the bats are only in like 2 shots of the movie. That's what's on the box and what makes you rent the movie. But when you actually get it, it's actually just yet another zombie movie because every victim that gets bitten by the bats gets up and then they bite people and become more zombies. So they really kind of bait and switched you into that. And that's what almost every kind of monster movie does now. It's like, if we need to beef up the horror elements and we don't have enough money to pay for more CGI on the big monster, we'll just make the victims zombies because we can just slap some goo on their face and have them walk into shot and chase people around. So
like, are early filmmakers fans of horror, or is it just the ease at which it's made?
I think it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think, Matt? Yeah, I think I think they grew up watching the horror films, but I also do believe truly that they think it's the easiest thing in the world to do because they think it's just girls, screaming and showing their boobs and running over there. And it's not that. Like I said, there's so much more involved to it. To the good ones. Now there's, but pick any genre and you can name 1,000 crappy movies, but you could probably name 10,000 crappy horror movies.
So what's your favorite horror movie? I mean, it's like Creep Cop? Is that it? Creep Cop?
Yeah, that's everyone's favorite movie.
Could become my favorite. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to watch it.
I did watch a couple scenes leading up to this on Vimeo. They had a few on there.
Well, I'm a big Evil Dead fan. I do like Sam Raimi. I love Roger Corman. If we had not had a Roger Corman, we would needed to invent him. That man's amazing. If you don't know anything about him, look him up. What he's able to produce. And the man is 94 years old and still making movies. He's been working since 1955, and he has not stopped. But horror movies, I love, so much. I love Carpenter, Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm a big 80s guy. Recent stuff, I enjoyed a movie called Creep, but not Creep.
That's a good movie.
But Creep and Hush and Hatchet, things that were made in the 2000s. I liked The Conjuring very much, which was actually shot here in Wilmington. So.
Yeah. Well, if I can just like tack on to horror and like what inspires like young filmmakers to make it, I think like people who are into horror at a young age, probably like me and Craig and Rob, is like, I think a lot of those people just turn into cinephiles anyways, because it's the first like when you're into that, I think that's when like you're young and you're just like, you just realize at some point, hey, this is a movie. How did they do that? And you get interested in how they did that. And so you just become interested by default into filmmaking. Like, and I think that leads a lot of people into it.
That's how you fall into Troma, right? Because I remember when Toxic Avenger came out and Fangoria magazine would show the most grotesque scenes from that movie, and you're like, how did they do that?
Yeah, well, Fangoria ruled. Like, that helped a lot of young people get into it. But yeah.
Gentlemen, it's been an hour. This was very pleasant. We have any last minute question for our guest?
I think I'm good to go. And I did send my email to Craig in the chat already. So.
Okay.
I just want to say, hey, it's been fantastic, and I could see doing this again, and I'm surprised not more people showed up. This is inspiration from people in the business, and it's awesome.
As I told our guest at the beginning, I'm not sure everybody heard, but this will be recorded and put into the Intro to Film class in the fall. So there will be a number of other students take a look at this and react to it later on.
Oh, you got to have them, watch those movies. You got to have them watch those horror movies.
Yeah,
Not just Seven Samurai, Rob.
Hey, watch this. Hey, Craig. Hey, I don't know how Severin got away with Terminator 2. This Bruno Mattei. So it's shocking dark, but the slipcover is Terminator 2. So
Nice.
that's what every introduction to film student should watch. So
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to just shut off the recording. If people want to keep going, we can. How's that sound?
Works for me.
all right, thanks, guys.
All right.